Hey guys, and welcome to another huge episode of Triggered. So much to get into today. Today, we're going to be talking about what's really happening on the ground in Minneapolis with investigative journalist Cam Higby, who has been at the center of telling this story. He's the guy that's uncovered the signal chats, the essential, insurrectionist techniques used by terrorists around the world that have actually been deployed in Minnesota and especially in Minneapolis to prevent federal law enforcement, from doing its job. And just like we've been telling you guys, the left-wing chaos you're seeing on the streets of Minneapolis is not organic and not at all grassroots. It's highly organized and very well funded. As we've been covering on each show, each area of Minneapolis has its own signal chat group. They use emojis to designate roles. They have mobile patrols who spend their entire shift driving around looking for federal vehicles, license plate registries, etc., etc. When they spot one, they send it to plate checkers who cross-reference it against a database of known federal assets. They have dispatchers running calls all day long telling people where ICE has been spotted and how to impede them. And Tim Walz and Jacob Frey, they're still saying they don't want to cooperate with federal law enforcement. Of course not. Of course they wouldn't. Not for any legitimate reasons, but because we're finding out that members of the local and the state government are literally implicated in these anti-ICE operations, from a Tim Walz strategist to possibly the lieutenant governor of the state. Check this out.
ICE doing enforcement operations at a church. False. Didn't happen.
They were parked there. They did not do an operation there. She said they were parked in a public space legally.
But to say that and to push that out there puts fear in the immigrant community. So let me tell you what's happening.
That puts fear in the community. Right. To park the ICE agent's vehicle
they're on a
near
public
a church.
Street.
They
they're
are
on a public street.
She said
they're on a public street,
sir.
waiting to respond to a criminal alien release pulled aside the road. Let me tell you, in the last couple of days, what's happened in Boston. They've arrested Victor Gomez Perez, a 33-year-old criminal alien from Guatemala, with charges of aggravated rape, assault and battery with dangerous weapon, indecent assault and battery on a victim 14 years or younger. They arrested Kaylee Espinosa, a 34-year-old criminal alien from Colombia, with charges of aggravated assault on a pregnant victim. They arrested Joshua Gonzalez, a 24-year-old criminal alien from Dominican Republic, with charges for trafficking heroin, morphine, opium, resisting police, disorderly conduct, and drug distribution. They also arrested Samuel Armando Barrero, a 20-year-old criminal illegal alien from Guatemala, pending charges for assault and battery on a child. So Mayor Wu and Governor Healy, they ought to be calling ICE and thanking them for making their streets safer, for protecting their communities and taking these people off the street. They've turned a blind eye to this. They're sanctuary cities. Sanctuaries, cities, and sanctuary states are sanctuaries for criminals. Give ICE access to the jail to arrest a bad guy in the jail rather than have to go in the community to find them. Because when you go in the community and find them, it puts ICE officers at greater risk. It puts the community at greater risk. It puts the alien at greater risk because anything can happen on a street arrest. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to prioritize public safety threats. But when you got governors and mayors who are releasing these public safety threats every day into the community, that causes the crime rate, and we've seen some terrible incidents in the last few days where innocent victims are murdered. This past year, I've seen innocent Americans raped and murdered by people who are not supposed to be here. So rather than going back and forth and say, well, ICE has got a car parked near a church, that is ridiculous. You're out there looking for people like this, exactly what they're doing.
Well, I would argue that actually that the ICE vehicle parked outside a Spanish mass is a frightening sight, given what has happened in this country. I also, with respect, sir, thank you for the information that you have shared on this show, but we would appreciate all of the information. All of it. All of the data that you say you have.
I've done this show several times. Every time I'm on your show, I speak with integrity, I speak with honesty, and I speak with facts. The bottom line is, because of all this false narrative, and you using the term disappearing people,
well,
is
that's
disgusting.
what's happened. That happened to the group that was sent to El Salvador.
U.S. citizens get arrested every day. U.S. citizens get arrested by police every day. Are they being disappeared? No, their laws are being enforced. They're being arrested. They're being put in detention because they committed a criminal offense.
Not like what you're doing.
Not even close. We're enforcing the law and arresting people here in violation of law that are public safety threats. That's not disappearing people. That's enforcing the laws of this country and making this country safer.
Investigative journalist Cam Higby infiltrated the Signal chat groups that these anti-ICE activists are using to coordinate their operations in Minneapolis. And what they found is absolutely stunning. The agitators track the size of federal units, their activity, locations, uniforms, times, and equipment. These people are running a quasi-police force to literally hunt down federal agents. And Higby found that they delete their chats daily, refresh the groups, and use code names to avoid any possible way that they can be detected. Again, this isn't organic grassroots activism. This is exactly the opposite. This is a coordinated campaign. And the fact that a Waltz campaign strategist, someone who actively worked with the governor of the state on his campaigns, intimately tied, knows him well, is running one of these signal groups, tells you everything that you need to know. Of course, they're not going to talk about this in the mainstream media. They rather run with the narrative that these are people protesting for the rights of others. They're doing it totally on their own volition. It's so terrible what's happening. That's not the case. Make sure we get this out there. It's why we ask you to like, to share, to subscribe. Make sure that everyone understands what is actually happening. This is like the BLM scam. Everyone was really outraged, and then they found out it's just a siphoning mechanism to pull a lot of money in there, create outrage. It's organized. Those pallets of cinder blocks didn't just magically show up at protest sites on their own. It just took a long time to get there. Let's accelerate that learning process by getting people the information. So this is going to be a really important episode. So make sure you guys are liking, sharing, subscribing, so you never miss one of these major episodes. Remember, if you do miss the show here on Rumble, go over to Apple, Spotify podcasts. If your friends get their podcast that way, make sure this information gets out there, because there's so few people actually willing to do it, to tell the truth, and to make sure it gets out there. You guys have to be a part of that first line of defense. And for all of the top headlines that we cover here on the show, go over to my news app, MXM News, like minute by minute, Mike X-Ray Mike News, where you can get the mainstream news without the mainstream bias. And of course, don't forget about our brave sponsors for having the guts to support this program. From Amazon MGM Studios comes Melania, a new film that takes you inside the 20 days leading up to the 2025 presidential inauguration through the eyes of the First Lady herself. Step into her world as she orchestrates inaugural plans, navigates the transition, and moves her family back to the nation's capital. History's biggest stage on the biggest screen. Melania, only in theaters January 30th. Also, guys, developing news on another left-wing insurrection. Here's the news, what's happening right now in Georgia out of Fulton County. Another sick example of just how badly our government has been subverted, how your taxpayer dollars are being used to fund the never-ending nonsense and the attack on your rights. Check this out.
Tonight, FBI agents are going through materials found today during a search of the Fulton County, Georgia election office. That search is said to be related to the 2020 election. Correspondent David Spunt has details tonight. Good evening, David.
Brett, good evening. FBI agents are still on site at the records warehouse for the Fulton County, Georgia Board of Elections. The matter is sealed before a court, meaning details are limited, but we can report this is related to the 2020 presidential election. Sources tell Fox News that agents retrieved documents, phones, and computers after a judge signed a warrant. President Trump has long made Georgia, and specifically Fulton County, a target of his complaints relating to the 2020 election. Shortly after that election, election, Trump spoke to Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and said he needed 11,780 votes to win the state. At the time, Raffensperger said he felt pressure from Trump and denied any widespread election fraud. He continues to deny it to this day. Now, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis brought state criminal charges against then former President Trump and others in 2023 for conspiracy to overturn the election. But her prosecution, Brett, was eventually derailed completely after it was revealed she had an intimate relationship with the top prosecutor on her team, and it could have tainted the case. Late last year, a judge dismissed the case in its entirety. Now, Brett, last month, the Justice Department sued Fulton County, Georgia, seeking access to 2020 voting records after state officials allegedly failed to respond to a subpoena. Fox News has learned the head of the FBI's Atlanta field office was recently forced out in recent days, but it's unclear, Brett, if this is all related.
And joining me now, investigative journalist and fearless America First warrior Cam Higby. Cam, great to have you on here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Cam, without revealing too much as far as your methods, what drew you into this story in Minneapolis? Where does this all start for you?
Yeah, I came to Minneapolis to cover the riots, and I made, let's call it a friend, who was able to obtain links to this network of signal chats. And by the way, the mainstream media has been getting this wrong. There's not just a signal chat. There are hundreds of signal chats all across Minnesota, just in Minnesota. So I was able to obtain some of the links to those chats. I joined the chats, and then I began documenting what was inside of them and using them to show how they were put into action. So when they would call out intersections to track down ICE agents, I would go to those intersections and find the insurrectionists. And there I would document their behavior as they put that into action.
Yeah, I mean, what you've really uncovered is basically a quasi-police force that's hunting federal agents. Can you give us a sense of the scale here? How many people are we talking about across Minneapolis? How organized is this really?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right with the quasi-police force. I mean, they have dispatchers, they have medics, they have patrol cars, they have stationary patrols, foot patrols. Honestly, it's more fleshed out than the Minneapolis Police Department, to be honest, and there are more of them. As far as scale goes, it's really difficult to tell because the maximum number of people that can be in a signal chat is 900. So people cycle in and out of those chats all day. How it works is you have different zones. There'll be a patrol chat for the south side of Minneapolis, for the east side, the west side, the north side, the northeast side, the northwest side. And within each of those, there's patrol zones as well. And there are general discussion chats for each of those zones, et cetera. So it's difficult to tell the scale outside of 1,000 per area, but they max out almost immediately. Every single day they make a new chat. So all the chats are dated. At the end of the day, they delete the chat and they create a new one. And almost immediately when that new chat is dropped, it maxes out in people.
Yeah, I mean, it seems interesting. I've been reading, about it, since you basically uncovered it. And I mean, the details are stunning. Of course, the mainstream media is never going to carry this. These are all just really people who are just upset and they're protesting with their right. I mean, that's all BS. I think we know that. But, they likened it. Some of these are, former, special operators. They liken it to what was going on with the insurgency in Afghanistan. That's how the Taliban communicated. That's how the Iraqi resistance did it. I'm sure the same thing was happening in Syria. And I mean, this is basically functioning the same way a terror cell would overseas that our military had to operate against.
Yeah, totally. And to be clear, a lot of people are getting this kind of mixed up. They're like, well, you have a right to organize protests. The only issue is that these people aren't using these chats to organize protests. The sole express and intent purpose of these chats is to impede federal law. It's the only reason they exist. There's a difference between when you see people at the Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis and when you see people in the neighborhoods during ICE operations. That's when you're seeing tear gas get deployed. This is where Nicole Good got killed. This is where Alex Preddy got killed. This is where the random, I forget his name, the shovel guy, that's where he got shot, is in the neighborhoods during actual physical operations. How did people get to an ICE operation in a random neighborhood? I've driven around Minneapolis looking for federal operations so that I could document them as a journalist. It's like almost impossible. You can't find them, right? How are they finding them? Because they have dispatchers, because they have patrols, they have stationary patrols, and they have people calling out intersections. Once you have access to all of that information, it's extremely easy to find federal operations. When I got into the signal chats, I found at least like 5 in a day. I mean, the coordination makes it very easy. So these aren't protests. Their purpose is to stop federal agents from carrying out federal law enforcement actions.
So this, salute tracking system you uncovered, I mean, essentially military technology, size, activity, location, uniforms, time, equipment. Where are these activists learning essentially, counter surveillance techniques, counter insurgency techniques like this? I mean, this isn't something you just Google. I mean, there has to be a lot more depth to all of this.
It's a great question. I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that there are other external organizations involved, like the Democratic Socialists of America, for example. We just uncovered in their legal help chat, which is adminned by lawyers, some with their real names, surprisingly, and we were able to identify some of those people. In that chat, they have a form that's actually dedicated to reporting local law enforcement to elected officials if they're caught cooperating with federal agents. And that form was created by the Democratic Socialists of America.
Do these lawyers have liability if they're doing these sorts of things? I mean, if they're aiding and abetting, people who are literally looking to interfere with federal law enforcement, I would think that creates some actual liability, not covered by some sort of nonsense, attorney-client privilege here.
Yeah, I would definitely think and hope the exact same thing. I also wonder what are you reporting local law enforcement to elected officials for if they're cooperating with federal agents? It's not illegal. It's not illegal to do. And also, what's the purpose in that? Are they being punished by elected officials for cooperating with federal law enforcement? If so, that seems like illegal itself.
Yeah, and it may be too soon, but we know that the whistleblowers who blew the whistle on the fraud that was coming out of Minneapolis with the Somali population and sort of the fake daycare centers and the fake healthcare centers and the fake everything centers, money that was then siphoned to Al-Shabaab over in Somalia, an actual terrorist group. I mean, those whistleblowers who blew a cover of what was potentially billions of dollars of fraud of American taxpayers. I mean, we know they were penalized. They were not. They were either demoted. They were, certainly not beyond reproach like anyone who ever, blew the whistle against anything a Republican ever did. We saw that over the last, let's call it 9 years. It seems like there's a very different standard here.
Yeah, totally. I think that anybody who has not like been to Minnesota to see what's going on just can't understand it. I mean, the level of rot and corruption in Minnesota is something to behold for sure. It's disgusting, and it is like rot throughout the entire state, especially in Minneapolis. And by the way, Minneapolis Police Department doesn't do anything. I mean, between Nick Sorter and I, we must have called 911 a dozen times in the process of almost being killed, and nobody came, nobody showed up. We were left for dead until one time when Nick Sorter was being dragged by a vehicle after a bunch of Somalis robbed him, pirates. Their dispatchers reported that we were actually the ones dragging the Somalis, so they came that time. We listened to the dispatch call on that. And
really?
But nothing. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, again, I know that I'm sure they've been ordered to stand down, but I would think, listen, I know a lot of great people in, law enforcement. I imagine there has to be someone, sort of whistleblower. It may not go anywhere, but now that this has sort of escalated to what seems to be a federal type of level, I imagine, they can come forward and talk about what this is happening. Because again, there's no way this is a coincidence. There's no way they're doing this out of their own volition. Someone's giving them an order, because I can't imagine the average police officer, especially the way they've been treated by the Democrat Party over the last decade or so, is in favor of this. I'm sure there's some that are playing along, or it's just easier to get along, and that's how you get your promotion. And maybe you too can become police chief, even if you didn't deserve it, so long as you kowtow to the Democrats who are running your state. But have you done anything to be able to try to get to those people to find out where this is coming from?
I haven't been able to find any whistleblowers in Minnesota. I have been able to talk to people in places like Seattle, where you have another major corruption issue in your police force, so they don't do anything about Antifa and they just let them run the streets. I know several people in the Seattle Police Department who are telling me, the majority of the police force doesn't want to cooperate with Antifa, but these are the orders that we received and we don't have a choice. Which
So,
is
yeah, I mean, talk about the parallels between that. I mean, I think everyone realized in time, it took a while to get there. And I imagine, the same thing will be happening here, right? People, they're busy trying to, live their lives, make a living. That's not the easiest thing in the world. And so, they're only getting what the mainstream narrative was. I think everyone realized, BLM was a scam. It just took them, a year or two to actually get there. I mean, do you think there's enough here that people realize that none of this is organic, that it's all very intentional? Despite sort of the narrative that's being put out there right now, which, I imagine if people are only looking at it on face value and what they hear from the mainstream media, oh, this is terrible that it's going on in the country. It's like, I think it's terrible that there's literally an insurgency being funded by, one of the major parties in the country, that police are told to stand down, to only protect certain demographics, et cetera. I mean, what do you see as the parallels there? And do you think we sort of get to that aha moment where, the vast majority of Americans understand that this is just entirely manufactured bullshit?
Yeah, I really hope so. I mean, I've been trying to do my best to capture as clear a picture of this as possible. I also understand that I'm kind of pushing out a lot of stuff that makes it maybe difficult to decipher. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to make this as obvious as possible for the American people that this is orchestrated, it is coordinated, it is on purpose. Another thing I've been saying too is they are flying the like Star Wars rebel flag at their protests. They call themselves the resistance. Rebel, resistance, insurrectionist, they all mean the same thing. They're synonyms. Yeah. Okay? It is an obvious insurrection against the federal government. They admit that it is an insurrection against the federal government. And then when you call them insurrectionists, they pretend that they have no idea what you're talking about. Just like you said, it's extremely coordinated and somebody's funding it. They have mutual aid networks. They somehow have tons of supplies at all of the events that they host. They have gas masks. They have food that they go around and pass out. Now they've got the governor deploying the National Guard under Title 32 and handing out donuts and coffee to the insurgency.
Yeah.
I
mean, do you think a lot of it's just a ploy to, get my father perhaps to, put in, the Insurrection Act and whatever it may be to try to escalate it? Look what they're doing. I mean, or do you think it all gets out? Because I mean, I don't think this can be allowed to continue in this country, but it also seems like they're baiting you to escalate. I mean, that's clearly what happened with some of those shootings. Obviously, any kind of loss of life is terrible, but like, it feels like they're more than happy that these things happen. And if there's some casualties that they can use to propel their narrative, so be it, because, these people are putting themselves into these situations very obviously and clearly.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation because there's a possibility that they could be baiting the president into declaring the Insurrection Act and escalating things more, but they're also willing to absorb casualties and potentially harm federal agents too. So it's like, what do you do against a rebellion that's fueled on propaganda? And this is the kind of catch-22 of dealing with a situation like this. Now, personally, I don't know if that's what they're doing, because I also don't know if Tim Walz is actually smart enough to think that far ahead.
Yeah. Or by the way, the Somali population, of Minnesota. I mean, just basic facts. I've read, I guess, average IQ of Somalians is 68. By any standard prior to the last few years where they adjusted it, to make those people, not, let's call it, mentally challenged. I can't imagine a population of people with 68 IQs, organizing in this capacity, taking on the federal government, organizing massive fraud rings by establishing businesses and user IDs and tax identification numbers and all being domiciled out of the same place. I can't imagine that people that would have been, rated, mentally challenged at any other stage in, modern history are doing that on their own. They didn't just come there. It didn't just happen by coincidence. There's got to be, someone pulling the strings here.
Yeah, definitely. And the demonstrators, the observers, the ice chasers, insurrectionists, whatever you want to call them, also aren't that smart either. So when I exposed them, their plate checking website was called defrostmn.net. They password locked it, and they actually left the password in the inspect page of the website. So all you had to do was click inspect, and there's a password for the website. So they're not very smart on the security side of things either, which is why there's been so many breaches, especially like on their new app, because they're trying to leave signal. So there could be somebody planning it behind the scenes, or they could just be really smart and really stupid at the same time. Unclear.
I guess both things can be true at once, but I guess one of the big things in terms of tying it to sort of the government, I mean, you literally identified a former Tim Walz campaign strategist as one of the Signal Group's admins. I mean, I can't imagine this person just out there on their own and doing this. I mean, literally, they were a strategist for this campaign. Based on what we know right now, how directly connected is the governor's political operation to what's happening on the ground?
My personal guess, and this is just a guess, is I would say that it's probably pretty connected. I think that a lot of the people around Tim Walz, I don't think he's dumb enough to be in there himself. I think that, but I think that a lot of the people around him are likely in those Signal chats. And some of them have admitted it. Some politicians have talked about the Signal network that they're linked into for rapid response. I think there are a lot of politicians involved. I believe some members of city council have also been identified as being in the Signal chats. I'm kind of doing info dumps, so I go in, I record all the members, I screenshot everything, I just document every little thing inside the Signal chats, and I just push it out and let people like 0 hour, hunt people down. Because I'm still doing on the ground work. I mean, up until I'm home now, but up until yesterday, I was still splitting my time between Signalgate and actually still being on the ground reporting at the riots.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's a lot of work. You're right, though. I mean, in following it, even over the weekend on Truth Social and on X, I mean, it's an overwhelming amount of information. So I imagine that allows investigators to get to the bottom of something in time. We got to understand there's a process. Obviously, our people want sort of action immediately. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. But of the things that you've done, what do you think are the things that really create the biggest level of culpability, for those involved?
Wait, could you ask the question one more time? You broke up.
Yeah. Of all of the things that you've done, because you're right, there's a massive amount of information that's being sort of thrown out there. What are the things that people should really key on to understand, just how inorganic this actually all is?
Well, I think a big one is that form that I talked about earlier, where you can report local law enforcement to elected leaders and try to get them in trouble basically for assisting federal law enforcement. It's not illegal, and actually it's like extremely common everywhere other than Minnesota. What is happening as a result of that form when it goes to elected officials? What do they do with it? Do they punish law enforcement officers? Do they dock their pay? Do they demote them? What are the results of that? That's a question that we need answered. And there's another form that leads directly to Attorney General Keith Ellison's office that's specifically designed to report things like this. So is he also involved? Because we've actually seen Keith Ellison on the ground at the Whipple Federal Building protesting with them.
Well, and he's also pretending that the fraud's not really a big deal. It's only $9 billion. I mean, what's going on. So I imagine, like all of the other NGO scams, this money gets sent abroad through remittances, gets distributed to, Al-Shabaab, again, a terrorist group. And then I'm sure some of it gets kicked back through, the NGO process to fund Democrat campaigns. And it feels like so much of this is really just about being able to get reelected in Minnesota, because if everyone's in on it and there's enough of a voter base, you give them what they want. Who cares if it costs, as long as you're able to maintain that sort of hegemony of power in the Democrat Party in Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really what it's about. I think the reason that they're so reactive and so upset and so mad right now, and the reason that I think it appears that local leaders are aiding and abetting this insurgency, is because they feel so threatened by the exposure of the fraud. That's what it appears to me. Mm-hmm. I really actually don't think that they're trying to bait the federal government into the Insurrection Act and a rebellion. I think they're allowing the insurgency to distract from the fraud claims.
Yeah, is it just one big diversionary tactic? And I mean, I guess they're both seemingly very illegal, but I don't think $9 billion in fraud is just disappearing. Obviously, there is a process that has to be gone through. It takes a little bit of time. Speaking to Kash Patel a while ago, they've been looking at this stuff for a long time. But again, if we don't follow that process very clearly, it just gets thrown out, and you'll see a judge, whether it was the judge that wouldn't sign the arrest warrant for Don Lemon, even though he was clearly agitating the breakup of a church service in violation of various acts and rights of people. No one in the judiciary, especially in that state, which is again going to be entirely the uni party controlled by the Democrats, is actually going to allow you to do your jobs or get you what you would otherwise be able to get in 2 seconds if it was let's say, a Republican agitator doing these things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely what it seems like to me, for sure. It's just a big diversionary tactic.
So, you mentioned earlier, Nick, that, the 911 dispatch issues. I mean, is there other evidence suggesting that the local police may even be cooperating with these groups, themselves, not just being told to stand down from on high? What did you find what's the environment like inside local police right now?
Yeah, there actually is. I haven't spent a lot of time talking with local police, mostly because I can't get a hold of them. But there was one exchange between the insurrectionists and the police. There was an exchange that it's secondhand. So they were basically relaying their experience with the local PD in the signal chats, and they said they had reported an ICE sighting in a park. They didn't believe ICE had jurisdiction. They called the police, told the police what happened, and the local PD told them ICE does have jurisdiction there, but let us know if they are a threat to public safety and we'll respond to it. Now, what's interesting about that is the insurrectionists took that as the police are cooperating with ICE, and I kind of take it as the police are cooperating with the insurrectionists.
Yeah.
Maybe they're kind of playing the middle, but
yeah, I mean, I imagine there's some of that because, again, just knowing as many law enforcement people around the country, it's not like you're looking to help some sort of, impoverished, minority group. I mean, these are people, they're defending rapists and, illegal immigrants that are criminals and legitimate fraudsters. It doesn't seem like the hill that anyone would want to die on. And yet, because of the way it's been reported, because of the manipulation of the narrative, these are just people exercising their rights. And how terrible is it that you're actually doing it? I mean, man, it's a pretty serious moral hazard that we're getting to this point where they're more likely to defend, a pedophile than they are, law-abiding citizens and their rights and their taxpayer dollars.
yeah, I think the collective mind of our society is just kind of degraded. 20 years ago, first of all, this wouldn't have been an issue. Everybody supported deporting illegal immigrants. Obama was the deporter in chief. Nobody had a problem with it. Okay. Also, 20 years ago, if a bunch of delinquents broke into a hotel that federal agents were staying at and tried to kill them, there would be people rioting in the streets in response to that. Okay, people would be furious about it, that it was even allowed to happen. If MPD failed to respond and stranded a bunch of federal agents, people would be outraged. People would be outraged if there were people harassing federal agents at all of their operations 20 years ago. But for some reason, we've just done a total 180 flip where breaking into a hotel, completely destroying the front of the building, and attempting to attack or kill federal agents inside, leaving them bloodied everywhere, is just just another day in Minneapolis now.
Yeah. How is that? I mean, can you talk about sort of your strategy when you're on the ground? How do you go about conducting these, investigations so that you can get that evidence so that you're able to figure out what's actually going on? And why is it that no one else is willing to kind of put in that same, shoe leather?
Yeah, I mean, I try to just remain discreet as possible. It's pretty frequent that I have to have armed guards. They're targeting me. I mean, when I go back in, I see photos of myself from that day all over Blue Sky, where people were taking photos of me right next to me, didn't even realize they were taking photos of me. And I just have to carry mace and whatever else, have armed guards, hope that nobody shoots me in the head, and just do my reporting.
So what motivated you to sort of take on this mission in the first place?
I think it's important. I care about my country an immense amount, and I think that people need to be exposed to the truth. I have an extreme loyalty to the truth, and I think that people, when I started this especially, didn't have a full understanding of what was happening at these events, but I felt it was something that they needed to know. And so I began going on the ground and documenting these things and trying to do the best job I could to shine a light on it.
So, you and Nick Sortor are sort of the two guys that really, shine the light on this, whether it's the fraud, whether it's the, clear insurrection activities. Have you really seen anyone, from, let's call it the mainstream media out there, even trying to, do a semblance of justice to what's actually going on and what's frankly so obviously going on. Beyond perhaps, maybe some of the usual suspects sort of reporting on what you guys are doing. But is there anyone else on the ground actually trying to get to the bottom of this and get the truth out there?
There's a couple. There's a couple that get in the mix up. Fox and Newsmax a little bit. But as far as like anything outside of Fox and Newsmax, absolutely not. I mean, the closest you're going to get is like 30 feet from the protest, usually more. And most of the time you don't even see them. So that's how it is. I mean, we have to do it because the mainstream media won't get into the mix, and they won't. And they're not going to try to uncover anything either. It's just going to be basic interviews, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I imagine the rest of the mainstream media is sort of okay with what's going on, again, as long as they can maintain political power. And so they're not going to report on those that are doing this. I mean, is there any reason to believe, you'd mentioned Seattle before, that these sorts of operations are going on in other cities as well? Or is this level of organization really centered in Minneapolis right now?
I do think this level of organization is unique to Minneapolis, but absolutely there is organization happening in other states. It might not be to the extreme degree that it's happening in Minnesota, but it's definitely happening regardless. Maybe instead of hundreds of chats, there are dozens, right? But it's still happening.
Yeah, and I imagine the same fraud program is in a lot of these other, especially blue states, where they've been able to get away with it. And the quid pro quo is, hey, you're going to vote for us.
Yep. I can confirm that's happening.
How do you best figure that out? Because, I mean, it is a massive operation. There's tens of thousands of people involved just probably in Minnesota alone. How do you expand that to capture all of this stuff and just get it out there for the American people to decide? Because I think once they realize, and again, it's going to be hard to break through the narrative wall. The average guy that's, watches 5 minutes of news a day and doesn't do this like you or I on a daily basis and, really dig into the details. Wow, it sounds really terrible what's going on, but they're not even hearing why it's going on, and I think that's a real problem.
Yeah, I would say the best way to uncover it is most states, the information is public. You can find the institutions, the businesses, the daycares, the whatever online, and you can also find out how much subsidy they've received, and their addresses are usually public. So knock on their door and ask them if they're actually a daycare. That's what I did in Washington State. I went around the suburbs of Seattle and knocked on Somali daycares, and they told me that they weren't daycares despite receiving millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars in the past year. And how are you not a daycare? You're receiving daycare money. What's the deal here? I will say I do have to go soon just because the FBI agent has been waiting for a little while outside.
Oh, okay, I got you. Well, so maybe I'll wrap up, but I understand you're busy and you're dealing with the FBI, and I hope they take this information and get out there. But on a personal note, what's your background and how did you just even get into this line of work so people can understand it? Because I think we need a lot more of you guys out there.
Yeah, I'm a college dropout. My background is when I was in college, I was going to school for criminal justice, and then I switched to business, realized I didn't need it, dropped out, started doing social media, got banned on social media, lost my income, wrote articles for 3 years for basically no money until I finally got a full-time job in the sort of political media space, left that, and went fully independent. That's great. Just got on the ground as much as possible. Well,
like I said, I think you're doing yeoman's work. So, where can people, follow you to learn more, to catch up, to read up, to share with their friends who, who may rightfully so say, hey, this, at face value, based on the information that I'm receiving from mainstream media, this is terrible what's going on. But I think if they actually understood the depth of the rot, they'd realize that what's actually going on is far more terrible than anything they could have ever imagined.
Yeah, YouTube and X are definitely the best places to find me at Cam Higby, CamHigby. If you're looking for Signalgate stuff, X is the place to be. It's pinned to my profile.
Well, Cam, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. I know you got other things going on, big stuff. So hopefully you can continue to help break this stuff, uncover this nonsense, and get some justice for those who've actually been wronged.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like, to share, to subscribe. Download the Rumble app so you can watch it on your smart TVs. Get the information out there. It takes 2 seconds. Just go hit that like button. Share it with your friends. Again, no one is going to do this. The mainstream media is just going to run with a narrative. They're not going to tell you about the backstory. They're not going to tell you about the undercurrent. They're not going to tell you about the insurrectionist tactics employed by these, quote unquote, valiant protesters. They're not. We need you guys to help get it out there. Also, make sure to check out our sponsors down below in the video description. Okay, they have the guts to support this kind of programming, so support those who share your values. So guys, stay informed, stay engaged, and always stay a little bit triggered.